Among the most expensive appliances I've ever bought, I think.
Yeah, I was surprised that Patrick bought a hunk of metal for $300.
I like a guy who calls their fire pit an appliance.
Yeah.
That's dynamite.
Welcome to the Fine Home Building Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. I'm Justin Fink. I'll be your host. Rob is on the road again. Actually, he's not on the road. He's on vacation working on his house. But I'm joined by design editor Brian Pontolilo. Say hello, Brian.
Hello.
And associate editor Patrick McCombe.
What's up?
Nothing.
We should point out, I think it's only fair because we do give Rob a hard time on the show pretty often about not doing things. We should point out that Rob is doing something.
Yeah, he just tore off 3 layers of roofing.
3 layers of roofing.
Found out it was 3 after he started.
Yep.
He just said, "I'm dead."
He's
just
got a couple of dormers to get built.
Let's see what he gets done,
and a
all right,
new roof
Brian?
to put on.
Who's helping him with that?
I don't know. He's got a lot of brothers.
Yeah.
It's like tearing off shingles by yourself would be slow going.
Yeah.
My brothers never come and help me when I need stuff. I tore off my whole roof myself.
Me too.
I probably didn't ask for any help, though.
Me too, but my brother-in-law did show up shortly after to help me start to pass OSB up onto the roof, and yeah, they got me through a lot of the rest of it, but the tear-off,
Yeah.
it was all me.
It's brutal, too. And if you have, I mean, he's in an old enough house. He's got board sheathing, and that just makes it that much worse.
And a steep roof.
Because like you slide that scraper and it hits every 4 inches.
Yeah.
Like an elbow jarring.
That is the worst. That is the worst.
And not like you were saying before, Brian. And on top of all that, then you got the cleanup.
Yeah.
It's so filthy.
It's like
You get it all down to the ground.
it's a horrible work to get it
and now
off.
it's on the ground.
Yeah. Feels like stacking firewood. Like you never seem to stop touching the pieces before you're done. Anyway, so before we get going in really earnest fashion here, a quick reminder of all the ways you can stay connected to us. You can send us questions about your projects, ideas for discussion, or suggestions for future guests by sending an email to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. We also have show notes for this and every episode of the Fine Home Building Podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast, where you can also watch the video version of this show. You can also find that video version on YouTube on our Fine Home Building channel. So today we're going to be stepping away from the guests and getting back to some of the listener-submitted questions. But first we have some feedback/hate mail from the audience. Shane writes, "Hey guys, love listening to your podcast. You all are so fun, and I appreciate you wanting to pass on what you've learned. I really appreciate your knowledge of building science, and I get a lot from tuning in. I listened to an older episode recently where Justin talked about why someone using lime plaster was a bad idea, and he recommended cement stucco or American clay product. He said lime took literally years to dry, when my lime plasters dry in a couple of days. He made it seem very caustic, but I find it to be comparable to working with concrete. He said it's really hard to work with, but I've had better results with lime than with the setting gypsums, not to mention that lime gives a stunning finish that doesn't even need to be painted. He cited cement stucco in his appropriate interior wall finish and had no idea what was in the American clay product. I don't have a ton of experience, but after listening, I'm convinced that he has zero and for some reason still chose to answer the question.
Ouch.
I enjoy making lime plaster. You may have turned someone away from something that I take great pleasure in. Okay. But please, keep on talking. I do enjoy the show." That was a really old episode, by the way.
Yes. Can I have a couple of things to say?
I
First
figured
of all, I
you
want to
would.
ask about the photo. Is that his place?
No.
Is that his project?
No, I knew you were going to. As soon as I chose that photo from a random Google image search, I went, this is dangerous because while I'm reading the question, Brian's going to want to know if this is a photo the guy sent in. It's not, but it is a pretty gorgeous room.
And I
What
wonder
is
if
the material?
Those must be straw
I
bale
have
walls,
no idea.
right?
No idea. I was just trying to choose a representative image. There's going to be a lot of those in this show.
Okay.
Let's settle in.
I just want to congratulate Shane because that was an awesome email.
Yeah.
He bookended it by saying how much he likes the show. He gave us some good information, and he kind of kicked our asses a little bit right in the middle there with a nice burn. I loved it. Shane, well done.
Yep. Hey, that's what we do here. I've got no defense. I'm moving to the next. Barbara writes, in episode 59, you discussed the best way to detail an addition set on piers and wrapped up by talking about options for closing in the space below. Why does a house on piers need skirting? The house in these photos you were just raving about doesn't have anything like skirting on the piers. My house doesn't have skirting. I don't care if varmints go under there because it's wide open and has no appeal for them. Close it in, and all of a sudden, it's second only to my shed is the most desirable address in the county. So that's definitely a fair point from Barbara. Barbara writes us a lot of notes. But it was, when I thought back on it, it was kind of a funny juxtaposition, if you will, Brian, that we opened the show ranting and raving about how much we liked this cabin in the woods, which had no skirting. And then we went to a topic where we talked all sorts of options about how to cover up a foundation on piers.
Yeah. Well, and it's an interesting thing, right? Because that happens a lot in our magazine, right? Where we've had stories on value engineered framing in the same issue that we show photos of like
Triple
5 stud corners and people that call us on it.
Triple 2x12s.
And it
gable
comes
ends.
back to what a former editor used to always say, is that the answer to these questions is almost always, it depends.
Yeah.
You know? And we could get into like the reasons why houses do or don't. I mean, do they need skirting?
I think aesthetically it makes sense a lot of times, right?
And that's so that's not need, but aesthetically often it does, especially when, the more and more houses we see in floodplains that have to be raised. And often what's happening now is the houses are like same style little
tall.
bungalows or whatever, and now they're just that have always been built in those areas, and now they're just lifted up 8 feet off the ground on piers, and
Or
it
more.
looks funny, it looks awkward, and just as an aesthetic, some sort of skirting to ground it and to give it back its proportions makes sense. It's not always the case, and I think with this photo, the piers this house piers became part of the aesthetic.
Right.
I think Barbara's point is a good one too. If you put the skirting down, you are creating habitat for critters. If you leave it
absolutely.
open, they're not going to want to be under there.
But she's right. You don't need it, and you can make it look good without it for sure.
Right, but it is something to consider in the design phase. I mean, it's like you said, you can design. In the case of our discussion, we were talking about it was like a bump out addition, or not even a bump out, just an addition. And yeah, sure, I suppose you could design that so that it didn't need anything. But
You want to make sure your air barrier is good in both cases, right? Because even the skirting is not the separation between outside and inside. That belly on the structure is what's keeping out the.
Patrick, you need to listen to episode 59.
Patrick, catch up, man. That's what we were talking about.
What the hell are you guys working on at home, by the way? Brian, can I just point out that Brian sent me a text message the other day that he's still working on his kitchen cabinets somehow.
Yeah. I left him alone for months.
He took a week off of work to install 3 cabinets like 4 months ago. It's longer than that, right? When was that?
Oh, it was March.
Yeah.
We're in July.
We sure are.
Yeah.
Still haven't gotten those things in.
I don't even finished.
But they were so close to being finished.
Well, because I had a deadline.
Yeah.
And then the deadline.
Yeah, you guys aren't good at deadlines.
Things changed.
You editors.
Things changed, and I didn't have to hit the deadline anymore. So I just kind of stopped and moved. The weather got nice. I wanted to be outside.
Yeah.
So it's all good. It'll get done.
I'm still working on my flagstone walk that we started last summer, but we took a break for the winter, and now we're back at it. So we bought pallets of rough, irregularly shaped flagstone, and we're putting that down as a front walk.
It's bluestone?
It's bluestone, yeah.
Those are heavy suckers.
It's really heavy, and the perhaps most difficult part is their surfaces are irregular, so you can't just like put down a uniform screeded bed of stone dust to set them in, because you have to make the stone dust match the contour of the rough stone. So like you're picking them up 2 and 3 times to get them to lay flat. It's hard work.
That's fun. Are you doing polymeric sand between them? What are you doing there?
Exactly.
What brand are you using?
I haven't done that yet because we're still setting. But
I'd be interested. I've heard. I haven't had a chance to work with that. I've looked into it a little bit when I was trying to choose paver options, and
I'll tell you what not to do.
There are strong opinions about brands and the amount of Portland cement and staining and that kind of stuff.
Well, I'll have to look into that because I haven't got there yet. But you cannot use the stone dust to fill in between the stones because, like, if you go to sweep the walk or shovel or whatever, it all comes out and makes a huge mess. And the stone dust particles are really sharp. So, they'll scratch your hardwood floors if they get stuck to your shoes and stuff like that. So it's kind of a pain.
Right.
I
didn't even think about that with the pea stone on my patio. I didn't think about the gravel getting stuck in my boots.
You got to check when you walk in the house.
Shut it down.
Are you cutting stone to make tight joints? Or?
Yeah, so we're keeping it relatively rustic, but, to cut off a corner, to tighten the joints, we're trying to keep them, 7/8 or less.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a fun part. I expected that to be the really onerous part of the job, but cutting the stone with a 5-inch grinder and a diamond wheel goes pretty fast. And if you cut an inch or more through, you can break off.
Snap it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the fun
Cool.
part. So
that is fun.
I was shoveling gravel last night in preparation for a new section, and I forgot how hard that work is.
Yeah, I was trimming tree branches last night with a giant pair of loppers. Shoulders are feeling it. Muscles I haven't used in a while.
Yeah.
But you just bought a fire pit ring too.
That's part of this project.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Everybody needs to have a fire pit. Let me just tell you that, Brian.
The local masonry yard had this steel ring. I think it's 30 inches in diameter with 2 grates that are on the top and fold up out of the way, much like you'd see at a state park campground or what have you. So I pried open my wallet to the tune of 3 bills for that yesterday, which was among the most expensive appliances I've ever bought, I think.
Yeah, I was surprised that Patrick bought a hunk of metal for $300.
I like a guy who calls their fire pit an appliance.
Yeah.
That's dynamite.
So how do you is it just sit in an opening with gravel at the bottom?
Ours is on a bed of gravel.
Is it already in?
Well, it's sitting on the ground. The stone is not placed around it, but it seemed like a logical step is to site it and then fill in the stone.
Around it.
Yeah.
Very cool. So is it going to be sunk so that it's flush, or are you
No, it's going to be raised up.
So you'll build up stone around it.
Yeah, and we'll put stone veneer. The steel ring has a 1-inch flange on the top, and the stone kind of fits against the vertical part to finish it off.
Yeah.
So what kind of stone will you use for that?
Probably stuff we pull from the stream, and we have a little stream that runs behind our home, so I'll probably rummage around in there and take what seems to look good.
Steal from Mother Nature.
Is that stealing?
I don't think so.
I won't tell the Wetlands Commission, that's for sure.
You just did. All right. Want to do some questions?
It sounds good.
Neil writes to us, what do you guys think of the tiny house fad that is sweeping North America, or at least sweeping your favorite network, HGTV? Man, I am still getting heat from that HGTV commentary that I've done. I have my doubts about anyone's ability to actually live long-term in a tiny house. Small, yes. Tiny, no. But even bigger doubts about the structure's ability to last long-term, at least the way they're being built on TV. Would love to hear your thoughts. I couldn't remember if we've talked about tiny houses on here, have we? It's all blurring together.
Maybe a
like in passing.
time ago.
I don't remember getting into the opinions on it.
No, I don't remember that either.
What are your opinions on it?
Well, mine are pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I think that this tiny house movement, this 100 to 200 square foot home thing.
I think tiny house is technically anything under 500, according to Wikipedia.
Okay. Well, according to Fine Home Building, I think it was anything under 250 when we defined it. But
What do we know?
Anyway, I do think that it's interesting, movement, if you could call it that. I think it largely is, in the context of home building, I think it's largely irrelevant and fringy and extreme, and not something that is as much of a solution for what some of us might consider the problems with home ownership and home building. Of course, fringy, extreme things can point to some good ideas, and I do think that everything that the tiny house movement is pointing to in terms of resource conservation, energy conservation, affordability in home building, and affordability in lifestyle, I think all those things that it's pointing to are still true of more relevant small homes, right-sized homes.
Right.
Homes where you do think about design and build your house to be more affordable, so you're not spending your money on what you don't need, so that the house really fits your family and your lifestyle, so that you do save resources, save energy, and save your own money for other things that you'd like to do. And that's the lifestyle component of this tiny house movement. So I don't think you need to live in 200 square feet on a trailer, bumping into everyone all the time to reap the benefits that the tiny house movement is pointing to. I think you can do that and have 800 square feet.
Right. It seems like
1,000 square feet.
It seems like a very drastic interpretation. Like we got to the point where houses got kind of big and maybe a little excessive with the McMansion movement, and then the reaction to it seems to have been to go completely in the opposite direction, almost to like the point of being a caricature of a house. Like the only people that I can imagine really happily living in a tiny, well, that's a tough road to go down. I wonder how many people really like living in tiny houses versus have like just kind of this, what's the term for that? Confirmation bias?
Right, because you do it so you like it.
Right. Yeah. You're going to defend it because you just did it. And
yeah. Hey, they're fun.
They're
great, like second home for a getaway on like if you own a property somewhere.
I mean, the truth be told, there's a bajillion people in the country who are living in ultra tiny apartments, and
absolutely,
and that's working fine, I guess. But I think this is a little bit of a.
I don't think it's about housing. I think it's about consumerism.
Yeah,
it's a response to having less stuff, simplifying your life. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think we have too many things in this culture that we don't really need, and it's a distraction.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can definitely go through the exercise of downsizing your life without having to go to this extreme. And if this is what it takes to force you to take a look at, well, how many pots and pans do I really need? How many pairs of shoes? You know,
scented candles.
Yeah, the
extremes
are tools, Patrick. What about the tools?
If what the movement does, if what the extreme does, is gives people ideas, that's great. Then it served a great purpose, right? If it gives people ideas on how to downsize, how to minimize.
It's not new. Like, people have hunting camps or cabins and fishing camps and cabins and beach shacks that, waterfront real estate is very expensive now, but you used to have this little tiny place that you'd go to, and it wasn't especially finished, and everyone loved it because it was a simplifying of your life temporarily, and, you use oil lamps or whatever, and I think that's what people want, is that simplicity.
Right, but I don't know. Let's talk about like long-term durability of these things. I mean, first of all, I think if you're making plans to essentially move it around place to place, which I don't know how many people are really doing. The reason why a lot of these things are built on trailers with wheels is because that allows them to bypass some of those regulations about it being a permanent structure.
Right. All of a sudden, it's an RV instead of a house.
Right. So that's why you see a lot of people building them on trailers.
I think it also, that is part of the simplifying, and I have flexibility to go wherever. I don't need to sell my house if I take a new job or whatever. I can just drive away with it.
Right.
I think that's part of that. Freeing yourself from the constraints of modern life.
Yeah. I wonder how a house would fare after driving down the interstate to a few states over where you relocated for a job. I mean, I know that they do prefab houses, and we can talk about that, but it's.
I think sheets with plywood or OSB, it's going to be pretty resilient.
I don't think those corners and drywall are going to crack.
It's so tiny, dude.
Yeah.
How much flex can there be?
I don't know.
I live in a house that's 800 square feet with my wife and 11-year-old son, and I can tell you it's 700 square feet. Did I say 11? 7.
700. You said 800, actually.
It's about 7. And it's a little bigger than 7.
A lot of numbers.
It's a little bigger than 700 square feet.
Do you want to start over?
I think it will. So, I live in a house that's a little more than 700 square feet with my wife and 11-year-old son, and it gets kind of crowded in there sometimes, I got to say.
Yeah.
It's like trying to do it in 200 or 300 square feet. It's not for me.
Yeah. You want some alone time.
Yeah, and like just that proximity means like whatever noisy thing you're doing is affecting everybody else. Even if, it's headphones.
And I have the same exact situation as you, same size house, same 3 people, and I've thought about like, so if it were me alone, would I want to live in a third of this? And the answer is no. Even if I were just alone, like I still think like maybe I could live in a little less and be happy living in a little less, but do I want to live in 200? Probably not. It just doesn't seem like doing things would be
easy. Can you imagine meal prep?
Meal prep, or so if you like to do those types of things, and maybe for some people they don't want to cook their meals inside or cook big meals inside, and they keep things really simple in that way, and that's fine. But.
Yeah, it's and I don't want to make blanket statements here, but like you start to go to the places where, like, let's say New York City, where a really small apartment is going to be more and more common for people because maybe it's A, what they can afford, B, what's most available, etc. I got to imagine there's a huge uptick in the amount of people that are not spending a lot of time in their apartments. I mean,
right, and they eat out a lot.
They're working long hours due to that life in the city kind of a thing. Yeah. There's a lot to do. You're always out and about doing things. And I wonder how much of that is, well, nobody wants to be back in their apartments because what the hell are you going to do there? There's no room. I mean, we all went to college. We all have seen the dorm room situation. Yeah. And I mean, I did that for years and it was fine. I didn't pull my hair out living that close to people. But we had a cafeteria and we went to classes. We're not living.
And you're right. There's city life is different.
There's no bathroom in the room.
Yeah, it's very different than what we're seeing in the photo behind you, which is like a tiny house out in the middle of the country. City life, you're walking by the grocery store every day on the way home. You
and there's a coffee shop to
meet
people.
Right. Yeah, and you're not shopping at Costco and filling up bulk items in your 500 square foot city apartment. You're bringing in what you're going to use in the next few days.
That's why I think
different life.
I think the exercise of it is interesting.
Yeah,
but it feels a little excessive, and I don't really get the point. Unless you really get off on that kind of Spartan lifestyle of like, we only need one pan and we're proud of it. We don't need all. But like I was jokingly talking about tools, but I'm at the point. I mean, from working that like there's one pair of pliers that you need for these specific 4 things, and that other pair of pliers is not going to do it right.
So you need all this stuff.
You need to have.
Yeah. Well, and that's a lifestyle thing. You can't do the kinds of things you do and live in a tiny house.
It's not for me.
You need, not only do you need a house, you need a big shop.
Yes,
that's your lifestyle.
I do, but when you try to settle on one item that does multiple things, there's usually trade-offs. And sometimes the trade-offs are not a big deal. And sometimes this just doesn't really work very well.
Yeah. Yeah, my brother-in-law is famous for saying, like, whenever you ask him, ask him about he's into outdoor adventure stuff, and I'll ask him about things, and he has a saying that I can't recall right now, but he always comments about how like things that do multiple things do neither of them good.
Yeah, right.
Like I was going to buy a bike and ask him like, should I get a hardcore mountain bike? Should I get a street bike? Or should I get one of those like sort of hybrid things? And he's like, you got to get both. Yeah. He's like, because the hybrid things, they're not good mountain bikes or good street bikes. That's his his opinion on that. On that kind of thing.
It's sort of there's a gray area, and the gray area is sometimes fine depending on where you're at.
Yes. Other times, your level of
other times you need them both. You need the high and the low, or so
I was going to point out too, like what I've seen, what these tiny homes cost. It's staggering to me. Like building an inexpensive home on a slab somewhere would seem to be similarly priced, and you could have a lot more space. And
it's
something that's not on a trailer.
You're going to pay a premium for ultra tiny things that are not widely produced.
Yep. And if you're having someone build this for you, it's a very niche thing, and they seem very boutique-y, right?
Yeah. And they're, everything inside it is custom. I mean, you're not going to buy stock cabinets. Well, I mean, people are going to send me 100 emails with, here's my tiny house stock cabinet. Let's just move on before I get in trouble.
I would like to live in a tiny house and report on it in an honest way, because one of the things that concerns me is that maybe people buy into the idea so much that then they're not willing to say that it sucked,
Justin
right?
Said that.
Yeah, the confirmation bias,
Oh, that's what you meant by that, yeah. So I'd love to do it and say, like, really report on it really honestly. Like, what's good about this and what really stinks.
You can find some articles on that online, and it's I just was kind of perusing through yesterday at lunch, just kind of looking at a couple accounts. There's actually some pretty funny ones too. People, parodying the whole tiny house thing that I thought was a real article. I was reading it and I got halfway through and realized, wait a minute, this isn't real. Anyway, so let's go to Catherine's question. Hi, gentlemen. Your timing was great on your recent tools episode. I'm really excited to get tools for my upcoming project. Do you have any suggestions for palm nailers? I have to put in a bunch of A35 clips, each with 12 8-penny nails, and the only way to reach into the tight spaces along the house rim joists is with a palm nailer. However, I've heard that these can be hard on the hands, and I'd love to know your suggestions for the best one. I have about 2,500 nails to put in.
That's a lot of nails.
My initial reaction to this was, it was funny because I started writing Catherine an email back. I wasn't sure when we were going to get to this question, so I wanted to give her an answer in case she needed something quick. And as I was starting to write, I'm like, I really don't have super strong opinions about a palm nailer. It's sort of like every one of them I've used is pretty good, and
I'd say the same thing.
They're all adequate. And then as I'm typing, I'm like, well, except for this. And then a day, I'm like, let me look up that other model that I liked that was kind of small. And by the end of it, I had this paragraph where there was actually some stuff to talk about. The one that I eventually settled on liking the best is this little mini Bostitch.
And other companies have those too.
It's about half the size of a conventional palm nail. I guess we should back up for people who don't know what a palm nailer is. It's essentially, it's like the size of a muffin, maybe. Would you say? Little like a flattened muffin?
Yeah, like the size of your hand.
I don't think of anything else that goes in your hand.
I think that's great.
It's like grabbing a muffin.
It's like grabbing a muffin.
And it's got a little, the muffin has a birthday candle sticking out one end. It could be a cupcake, I guess. And then it's
and when you press on it,
when you press on the head of a nail,
percusses.
Yes, it percusses and bangs that nail in. This is the best description of a palm nailer that you will ever hear. Anyway, so the idea is that you don't need to fit a whole nail gun in there, and that you can just hold this thing on the head of the nail, and
what's cool is you can
it pushes the nail
drive
in.
any nail with a head on it, right?
Exactly.
So unlike a nail gun that needs collated nails, these uses inexpensive regular nails.
Right. So you can use it for framing nails in tight spots. Then you can switch to joist nails right after that. You can drive whatever kind of nails. They're also ultra cheap. They're like $30, $40. I'm sure you can spend more than that, but you can get one for that cheap. They're dirt simple. But then we started seeing some of these smaller ones. They're about half the size.
Came out maybe, 5 years ago?
Yeah. And because they're smaller, they don't have as much power. But that's just a function of, it's like when you see a framing nail where they have that big metal body on them because they want a big reservoir of air for that punch to drive that nail. So a smaller palm nailer is going to have I'm speaking in broad strokes here. I know that there's ways around this from a design perspective, but generally speaking, a smaller palm nailer is going to be a little less powerful than a big one. So you'll have to
hold it there longer.
But for me, maybe for 2,500 nails to put in, and it's not going to.
I have a question. I've
Sure.
never used a palm nailer.
That's not a question.
That's a statement. To set up my question, how long does it take to drive a nail with a palm nailer?
Yeah, like 2 seconds.
Oh, so it's pretty fast.
Yeah, they're super fast.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And that's the noise it makes.
Also failed to mention. They have a magnetic tip, so you can put the nail on it and then reach up into a tight spot.
And some of them have different heads you can screw on.
I've never figured out what all those are for.
Like instead of having a tube that receives the head of a nail, it has they call it an anvil. It's just a flat disc, and I presume I don't know what you do with that, but
yeah. See, you don't know either.
I don't know what you do with that.
Yeah. And there's one that have like a little cover that goes over it with these snaps, like a little leather hand holder.
Yes.
You don't need that. You can skip that, Catherine. It's lame.
I think any palm nail you buy is going to work fine.
I think the Bostitch was a CN50 or something.
I've used Senko's, and I've used the little one from
PN50, I bet, sorry.
Grip Right, which works pretty well, too.
Yeah. You can't go wrong. They're super cheap. Everybody should have one. You won't use it too often. If you have 2,500 nails to put in, I would consider... I don't fully understand why you can't...
Use a connector
reach
nailer.
into tight spaces along the house rim joist with anything but a palm nailer. I get why you don't want to hand nail it, but you should look into a...
strap shot.
Yeah, strap shot nailer, which is another Bostitch product.
And
it's relatively inexpensive.
And I think it's about 12 inches, so it should fit in a 16-inch joist cabinet.
Nailer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super cool, must-have tool for anybody who works with metal connectors.
Really.
Yeah, just buy it once and then don't even think about it. Just, well, I only got this one deck, just buy it. And then you'll use it again.
It's a nice tool.
I waited too long to buy mine, and now
I wonder
use it
what
all the time.
Catherine's doing.
What are A35 connectors, Patrick?
She must be remodeling something.
I don't know.
Let's look it up. Make pleasant conversation.
This is where dead air happens because Justin's the host.
Yeah.
He's done this to us before.
Yeah. See, everything shuts down when I stop talking.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on then. All right. Jose writes, I have another tool-related question. I have a DeWalt 18-volt Nicad drill. It's about 10 years old, and the batteries have both stopped holding charge. Amazon sells new replacement batteries in a 2-pack for about $100. A new drill from the same brand with the same type of batteries and charger costs about $100. A new Ryobi drill at Home Depot with lithium ion battery costs about $80. So should I stick with the old Nicad batteries, buy a new drill with Nicad batteries, or go with a new lithium ion Ryobi? What are the advantages over one type of battery technology versus the other? I love the cost example here. Like this really illustrates a really interesting spot that we're in with tools now, where, I mean, we've known that replacement batteries are often a hard pill to swallow because they're so expensive relative to just buying a new tool with new batteries, because most tools come with 2 batteries and a charger. But the fact that a brand new drill with better technology is $80 compared to $100 for an outdated one is really interesting to me. Granted, it's not the same brand, but
We don't know exactly what he was looking at, but it's important for everyone to remember that the energy density, the amp hour ratings of battery packs varies quite a bit. So, and I was looking on Amazon today. It's often very difficult to determine what the amp hour rating is of a respective battery pack. So what I found you have to do is look up the model number on Amazon, take it to the manufacturer's website, and then you can more easily determine the amp hour rating. So
what are you talking about for a Nicad?
Yeah.
Or you mean for a lithium ion?
For both. So if he's comparing these different tools and they're all roughly the same price, he needs to make sure that it's apples to apples and oranges to oranges. If the amp hour ratings are considerably different, that could explain the price parity there.
But my experience has been that the amp hour ratings are usually written right on the tool, right on the packaging.
But if he's shopping online for these various products, like I said, it can be very difficult to determine what is exactly included in a respective kit.
Really?
Yeah.
I've not experienced that, but I take your word for it. I imagine that might be the case, especially for Nicad batteries, too. So, Patrick, do you want to give us a rundown of the Nicad versus lithium ion?
Yeah, so
For some people that might not even know what they have.
So Nicad is pretty much the original battery technology. The big disadvantage of it is that it's much heavier than lithium, right? Because you're talking about metals versus a much lighter metal. And for example, the Nicad cells are 1.2 volts per cell, right?
Right.
So in order to get to an 18-volt pack, you need 15 of these, right? You compare that to a lithium-ion pack, which each cell is worth 3.6 volts. You only need 5 in an 18-volt pack. So automatically you're talking about a lighter, smaller battery pack. And lithium-ion has about can hold about has twice the energy density of Nicad. So that's why your phone has gone that way. That's why all the power tools are going that way.
Right. And it also, because the batteries are smaller, or they can be sized differently. You can have like kind of big fat lithium ion batteries, or you can have skinny long ones. They can kind of manipulate that and create some interesting battery packs that are lower profile. Or
that's why most of them are slide on now, Justin, is because if you stack 5 of those cells in that manner, it resembles that shape, right? And you don't need a stock sticking off of it or what have you.
Right, the post style is the old kind of the old Nicad style.
And that was because in those packs, they had to stand the individual cells in the bottom of the pack all in a group, and then they had a tower sticking off of it.
And just for the sake of clarity, we're talking about Nicad, but what we're really saying is nickel-based, because there's nickel cadmium, there's nickel metal hydride, which are, I know nickel metal hydride
did not catch on.
Hitachi used it, and some other.
And Makita, I had a drill with that, and it was not very good.
So like you found, Jose, you can still go out and you can still buy Nicad tools. I mean, especially with the lower priced brands, Black & Decker, some old Ryobi, old DeWalt. I mean, certainly online you can find whatever you want. I mean, I can find an 18-volt Ryobi Nicad drill for $25. It doesn't have any batteries, but you can also buy off-brand replacement batteries that are made to fit.
So I've had a little experience with
which was a much more popular thing back in nickel days.
Yeah, so because they were so expensive, right?
And the batteries crapped out so fast.
So I had a chance to test those from one of the manufacturers, and they performed pretty well. They had similar runtime characteristics, but where they really fell down was when I put the pack in the freezer to see how it would do in cold temperatures, and then I dropped it, and the case exploded. And
did you drop it on purpose?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the Makita battery I was comparing it to did not. So clearly there are some trade-offs when you get those less expensive off brands.
I like when Patrick's tests always include freezing things and dropping them. Every time we do a tool test, he has to do those things.
When you live in New England, the reality is you're going to leave that in your truck, and it's going to be zero someday. Yeah. And if you drop it, and then you're going to drop it. Like, you want to know that it's going to fail.
I don't see it. I will let Patrick give his answer, but for me, this is a resounding go lithium ion. It's spending more money to invest in an old technology, especially buying an old, never mind buying replacement batteries for your old tool, but buying another old tool with old batteries, brand new, is very odd to me. Like the industry has shifted. They are still creating these nickel-based tool platforms for God knows why. I mean, I know that they're still making the batteries so that people like Jose, if they want to, can still find the batteries and support for their old tools. I don't know why they're still making the tools.
I don't either.
Is it just like old stock that they're trying to work through? What is the situation here? But
well, in the case of what's this gentleman's name?
Jose.
Jose's tower-style DeWalt batteries, the reason they're still making them is because they made a gazillion in the first place, and there are gazillions of tools out there. Yeah. So you have to.
Right. But did they have to still make the tool? Like
it's kind of weird, right?
I mean,
I think maybe in other markets they're
that's true.
Going to be, people can't spend the money that we do on tools, for example.
I wouldn't, depending on your level, Jose, I would not hesitate to look at that Ryobi very closely.
Great thing about that is there are so many other tools you can use with that battery platform, and they're not expensive.
So Ryobi, for people who don't know, is part of a larger company called TTI, and Ryobi, Rigid, and Milwaukee are all the same overarching maker. And they are very purposely aimed at those three different kind of levels. Ryobi for the real entry level, Rigid for kind of the mid-level and, pro category, and then Milwaukee aimed at the more serious pro, I guess,
That's the marketing.
That's the marketing. But the thing about power tools now, it wasn't like when Patrick and I used to be testing tools, 10, 15 years ago. It's where you used to get like a real lot of dogs in there. Like tools are just really good now. It just seems like even the worst brand you can buy is still so solid. I would buy a Ryobi and it would be fine. It'd probably last for decades.
My Rigid tools, a drill driver, a sidewinder, and a router are dynamite.
Yeah.
They're great tools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you're going to save $20 and be in new technology with a tool that is widely available, widely supported, has a good track record. And like Patrick said, then opens you up to, what do they have, like 100 different tools in that platform or something that all fit with that same battery? So it just makes sense.
Yeah, just that drill driver alone is a newer tool that's better.
Yeah,
exactly.
Other things have improved since your old DeWalt, besides the batteries. Yeah.
I would tell Jose he wouldn't use a cell phone from 10 years ago. It's like time to get a new drill, right?
Yeah. I still use an analog phone.
No, you don't. Do not.
All right. We got one more here.
Yeah.
We're rocking and rolling. Adam writes to us. I recently read this report and thought it may be an interesting conversation piece on the podcast vis-a-vis Keep Craft Alive campaign. As I'm sure you know, there are multiple outlets akin to FHB with their own initiatives to deal with the skills gap. Though the problem needs fixing, I think we may risk overcorrecting. At some point, there will no longer be a skills gap. Let's say that takes 10 years. As automation takes more and more jobs over the same time frame, what will happen to the cost of construction, salaries, good craftsmanship, etc.? Anyway, so Adam goes on to say that he currently has a good old-fashioned W-2 job, but does smaller remodeling jobs on the side on nights and weekends. He wants to retire at some point, move up north, and perhaps start his second career remodeling, building, or something else. But he's starting to think that those jobs may not be so bountiful by the time he gets to that point. So I thought it would be an interesting conversation to have about robots taking over work. And are we going down the wrong path by trying to revive the trades and keep them alive?
I think in the context of home building it's one conversation in the context of home building and another conversation in the broader context of hands-on labor and that kind of manual work that is still a large part of what's possible for people for employment opportunities. In terms of home building, it's and we kick this around a lot here at Fine Home Building because we regularly are seeing. This isn't even automated housing; it's manufactured housing. We regularly see manufactured housing as this idea of the future of housing, and this is still people building the houses. It's just
in a factory instead of in a field.
Instead of in the field.
So there are many levels to this.
There's many levels to this.
It's from just efficiency moves like what Patrick has been talking to the EcoCore folks who are doing factory-built passive houses. It's people working in a shop to build walls.
Yes.
And then you have something like an automobile assembly line, for instance, where there are robots doing some of the work.
Right.
And then beyond that, you have this other thing that some people talk about, artificial intelligence, which is what a lot of people are afraid of. It's when you've then figured out how to empower these robots to the point where they are making efficiency decisions for you.
Yeah.
And that is a whole other level of creepy that a lot of people are afraid of, other people are excited for. We are certainly not experts in that, and so we'll tread lightly there.
And that's where I was going. That what we haven't seen. First of all, factory-built housing has not taken off. It's been the future of home building for as long as I've been paying attention to home building. In many years before that, many decades even before that, and it has not. It is not grabbing a hold. It's a small, very tiny portion of the market that is not. I don't believe growing. We hear as for as many startups we hear about those startups then going under, going out of business. There's been dozens of those in my time covering home building. So that's an interesting thing. We have not yet seen them go to an actually automated production line. Would that change things? Would that turn it into, for some reasons of efficiency or cost, would that turn it into a viable solution? Would we then see things take off? I don't know.
Nobody knows anything about any of this. That's the thing.
No one
knows.
knows.
Like, this is all BS.
I know something.
It's all. This is all best guesses.
I know that robots are not going to replace the plumber or the HVAC tech or the remodeler who comes to your house to fix something, right? Those jobs are always going to be there as far as I can foresee.
If Carrie, you can put up the slide with the infographics because Justin loves infographics. And there's one thing I learned in this topic is that you can find no shortage of awesome, like labor force, color charts and plots. And like there's an interactive one where you can put your job on this thing and see what the projections are for whether your job will still be relevant in 50 years. And super cool.
I
definitely go and spend like several hours looking at all the different color charts.
Sounds great.
But to Patrick's, I would bring this up because Patrick's point does seem to jive with what all these Department of Labor and Statistics and all these other future forecasts are saying is that people that are going into people's houses and working on them are
safe.
Even from the doomsday perspective, seem pretty safe.
Yeah,
because how are you going to get something else to do that?
You can't. And there's like problem solving and analytics that a computer is not equipped to do, right?
Right. And, you can get to, if you go down this path of the artificial intelligence, then sure. And we'll get there. If we're getting to the point where computers are getting better and better, and sooner or later they're going to start making themselves better and better.
What I can see is
and then you're going to have a artificial intelligence plumber who's going to walk in, assess the situation. He's going to know better than any plumber, after X many of years of experience that have been planted into his little digital brain, that it knows that if this is the symptom, this is the solution.
Yeah.
And it's going to be better than a plumber because it's every plumber in one little robot brain.
I can see furnaces and boilers and water heaters diagnosing themselves too, right?
Exactly.
And that happens now. They have circuit boards and they can tell techs what's wrong with them.
Right.
And I expect that only to get more sophisticated.
Right. And the other piece of the puzzle in terms of that is do the appliances, the systems, do they all get better to the point that repair and maintenance is needed?
Not an issue.
Is needed less and less. Will it ever be not an issue? Probably not. But could it get to a point where it's needed less and less? So there needs to be fewer professionals? Probably.
Yeah.
So then what happens there? Because that's what that's kind of the root of this question is, so what happens to everybody that gets displaced? You don't need me on the assembly line anymore. You don't need me.
Typing up forums or.
Those jobs sort of went away. A lot of those. So like the real low hanging fruit was like data entry. I think accountants should probably be a little worried about, computer calculators taking over what they do. I know there's a lot to accounting, so don't write me emails.
Don't let Brett listen to podcast 62 or whatever number we're on.
I lost my train of thought. But so what people are worried about is, well, what about the guy whose job it is to build new construction,
and other hands-on fields too. I think he makes a really good point, because we can get, especially if people like us and people probably who listen to the show who are passionate about quality and quality things and things being made well, we can get passionate about that, and we can romanticize these careers. But if they're not viable careers, we could romanticize our way into encouraging people to go into fields that there's not a whole lot of possibility. And I think of furniture making, right? Not that it's not possible to make a living in furniture and not make furniture. If you're not passionate about it, you shouldn't go into it. Maybe you should if that's really your passion. But do we need more custom high-end furniture makers? Probably not. It's for a long time has been a thing that's been reserved for the wealthy and for people who really want something special. But most people, it comes down to economics, and they're going to buy their furniture where it's more affordable and readily available. So there is a risk there. And is there a skills gap in woodworking? I don't know. Probably you could say that, but is the need really there?
Well, the need. What do you mean by the need? Because we're talking about just what will sell, or are you saying like we need housing? Like, hey, somebody better start these lumber mills up because people are sleeping under bridges, versus people have got money and they want to spend it, and so let's come up with something that we can sell them. Because if that's what need is, then those high-end furniture makers, go, like as Rob would say, go nuts.
Yeah, I don't know enough about economics, but it just strikes me that
you know a lot, Brian.
It strikes me that making jobs for people to have jobs
is not sustainable.
Is not a sustainable economic future.
No. No, if the jobs are going to naturally go out on their own, then they're going to naturally go out on their own.
Yeah.
We don't need to artificially prop them up. But I think what part of the Keep Craft Alive movement and the other ones that you mentioned are about is that there's a skills gap. And that's what you're sort of missing. We're not just trying to create jobs because we can't let the past go. We're trying to create jobs because there are jobs that nobody is available to do anymore. Like we talked about welding and the amount of welders that are retiring every year, and we talk about people having trouble finding qualified contractors to do work on their houses. It's not
And we see that they're aging, right?
In our own demographics. So maybe I didn't say it well, but that's what I was getting at. Where there's legitimate need, we can encourage, but we have to be, to his point, we have to be careful not to encourage where there's maybe potentially not a need. Keep craft alive. I don't think of it as much as, I think it's as important to promote keeping craft alive in terms of passion as it is in terms of careers. Right.
Sure.
So not just for to make a living.
Yeah. But
if it's your passion, how do we help people engage that passion? It might be their hobby. It might not be their work.
Right.
That is as important to me as
absolutely. And it's also important to figure out, well, like what is your baseline of comparison? Because let's say that you look at these numbers and you're discouraged. Like, well, maybe we shouldn't pursue a career in the trades. Okay, so what are you going to do instead? I mean, just name something like doctor. I mean, prove to me that being a doctor is a safer bet than being a plumber. Like, how do I know that the same robots that are figuring out how to fix my furnace aren't going to take one look at the scratch on your leg and go, this is a problem. This is prone to infection. I'm going to give you this antibiotics. Here's an injection. Here's the paperwork, blah, blah, blah. You're out the door. You don't even need to see a human. This is a routine procedure kind of a thing, Like, why is that a safer bet? Why? I mean, if that's the case, then why are so many people coming out of college and have no jobs to speak of, in these supposed safe careers and these computer science and technology and it's the same problems, So I don't know what the safe bet is. I would guess anything that we're human compatible. Everybody should go into human resources.
Well, you can look this up. Jim Carrey gave a commencement address at a university one year, and I listened to this because it's Jim Carrey, and he was very good. He was very funny, and he was actually gave a good commencement address, and he spoke about his father, who was like him and was funny and wanted to be a stand-up comedian, and his father decided that he couldn't make a living doing that. And so he went into something in business and because he thought it was safe. Mm-hmm. And he turned out he was terrible at it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he kept getting fired and losing his job and couldn't keep a job. And so he gave up, dismissed this passion to go after something that he felt like was safe and failed at it. And so if your passion really is one of these trades that we promote with the Keep Craft Alive movement, or that this question is about, if that's really your passion, by all means, you got to go for it. Back to the question, though, is there a risk of over promoting the idea and pushing towards jobs that there isn't actually a sustainable future? And yes, there is that. I mean, I think we see it with the discussion in our country about coal.
Oh boy, Brian.
I mean, I really do. Like, what are we talking about? Trying to bring back coal jobs? Are we really doing a service? Are we really doing a service to the people of the country by trying to bring back an antiquated thing?
That is an economic question more than anything. Why would you bring back a fuel that costs more?
Everything's an economic question, Patrick.
Yeah.
In our country, in a free market economy, in a capitalist country, everything's an economic question.
Well,
that's what all the answers boil down to.
And most of these career choices that we're talking about here come down to, I want to make sure I'm making a good salary, and I want to make sure that my life is comfortable. Mm-hmm. Like, my parents discouraged me from going into the trades because they considered it to be a hard life. Like, it's hard on your body. It's stressful. You have to deal with a lot of customers who are going to be unhappy with things. There are easier ways to make a living, and I don't really agree with that. But that's their. I can see their point. Mm-hmm. That wouldn't have stopped me. But I think part of the Keep Craft Alive thing and these other programs is to give you that little bit of a nudge. Like, if the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning is the excitement to go out and make jewelry in your little studio, then maybe you should take a really hard look at whether you want to be an accountant in your day job, and maybe you have to sacrifice, get a slightly smaller salary and make your own but in exchange you make your own hours and you get to be creative and you get to do what you love all day. Mm-hmm. And it's not an easy equation, and it feels like we're trying to make it an easy equation, and it just can't be.
Right.
It's not black and white. If it all comes down to salary, then yeah, don't do that, I guess. But there are other factors here.
More fundamentally to the question, are there going to be too many plumbers or too many electricians? I can't see that happening in the near future, and the Department of Labor would, I think, agree with me that there is definitely a shortage of tradespeople, and they are getting older, and they're not being replaced. So one of two things is going to happen. There's going to be technologies that make up for that loss of the labor pool, or we're going to need to get more people to do these jobs, just because you can't have a society without plumbers and electricians and remodelers that we have. You need people to do those jobs, and they can't be done with a robot or a computer right now. Maybe someday that'll happen, but I can't see it happening for decades. What I do think will happen is that manufactured housing will continue to take a part of the housing market. I think if we look to Northern Europe, we see that most of their residential housing comes out of factories.
Does it take away jobs, though?
I think what it does is changes the nature of the jobs, and I think you need fewer people, just like on automated automotive assembly lines, right? All of a sudden, you didn't need as many welders to put car parts together. It was people managing the work of robots and technology instead of actually doing the bolting of parts.
So you think it'll go there? That housing will go to automation?
And I definitely think we'll see a lot more component manufacturers like roof trusses and wall panels and stuff like that. Do I think the majority of housing will be built in factories? I don't, because the amount of overhead to build homes in a factory is considerably more than it takes to build them in a development where you're using natural light. The temperature is what it is, unlike a factory where you need to heat it and light it and keep it organized. And a job site, once you're done, it's done. You throw all the stuff in a dumpster and you go home.
Right.
Yep.
But there's pluses to. I mean, certainly, I know you know this, but you're just not saying it right now. Is that there are definite pluses to having that factory, in that you can probably have 3 jobs running at once in the same building.
Oh yeah. So your production is suddenly way higher.
I'm sure that there are huge offsets to those extra costs.
Sure.
So
I think that's the only way it works, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I would love to. I mean, I'm sure that in this discussion we've said some things that will charge some people up, and there'll be some opinions.
You brought up coal.
Yeah. But one of the things I would love to hear about is people's experience with
tiny houses,
with the skills gap, because we hear a lot about shortages of skilled labor, in the news and in economic reports and stuff. But I can't say that over the years I've heard a lot about it from actual builders.
I have
a little bit, but not a whole lot. And I'd love to hear some people's experiences with not being able to find the trades that they need and what that's like, how they're dealing with that. I'd like to hear some real world experience from our listeners.
Some things that I've seen from it. And so there's different ways to skin that. There's I can't find somebody who knows how to build this stone wall. And then there's, to work on my crew of masons. And then there's, I can't find somebody who thinks more of this job than just, I get a paycheck to stack stones, and then I don't care about anything else after that.
Because I see those as two different things, right?
Yeah.
Not being able to actually find a plumber and not being able to find a good plumber.
Right.
They're two different problems in a way.
I hear a lot of our readers saying that, they're waiting way longer for their subs, as an example, because there's just too much work for them. And, the assumption is that they want the best, right? So they're not willing to settle for the hack plumber. So you wait, because that's the only alternative.
Yeah.
One interesting example that we talked about, I think it was last winter, when I was in my annual phase of wanting to go out and be a full-time carpenter again. Usually happens about once a year for a period of around 3 weeks to a month. And then
in January.
And then the weather turns bad, and I go, I'll stick with the office. But I always loved cabinet making and finished carpentry, and it was interesting to get into a conversation about I wouldn't do cabinet making because that one seems like it's the first one to go when
talking
when
automation
machines start coming online, and it's maybe, I don't know. But and then I had to go through that thing of is that a reason to not do it? Does that mean that nobody can make it work? Because maybe you're just competing at to somebody, you're competing on some other level then. I don't know. I just think it's kind of arrogant to think you're going to guess and figure it out.
Yeah.
So I resort to like, well, what do I want it to do? And yeah, maybe it's not going to work out, and then I'll do something else.
Yeah.
Like I get that that's stressful for somebody. They want to make a decision and then have that be their career path. But
well, in some cases, it's very expensive, right? You need to go to school and get training or so. Like, it could be tens of thousands of dollars in, lost costs if you
I just don't know
get a job.
how you're going to sit down and make an educated prediction of the future right now. Like, how do you know what it's going to look like? I mean, like, so our video guy, Colin, he was telling me a story that when he started doing video, he invested, I don't know, 25 or 30 grand into some kind of editing software that like you had to have this setup if you were going to edit. And years later, he just put it out in the curb for free. It was completely worthless to anyone. And everything shifted to like, this cloud-based software and, on computers, and you didn't need to have all this dedicated equipment anymore. And so should he have not been a video editor? Because or should somebody not want to get into making films now or being a photographer because everybody has an iPhone?
Yeah.
It's just a weird...
I agree. I mean, I do think it's hard to imagine certain needs and certain things in home building changing for, the next generation or two, because we have this housing stock that's going to be around for a long time. And
if you're a remodeler, you're safe, man.
Yeah. Plumbers, electricians, especially in the service, areas, that kind of stuff. It's hard to imagine, but you're right. We didn't imagine the iPhone.
Yeah.
15 years ago.
It hasn't been that long. Didn't it come out in
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It came out 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So just a short while before that, it was like,
and we've had photography for what, 200 years?
Yeah.
And look how much that's changed.
Yeah. So it is.
Your photography equipment is now also your phone and your calendar and your internet browser.
Yeah.
What I would worry about if I were a tradesperson would be big companies making inroads into those industries, right, and cheapening the labor rates.
Yes,
because that's happened to mom and pop pharmacies and grocery stores and bookstores and name the business. I could see that Amazon all of a sudden having a home repair arm would be a big threat to your business, right? Huge marketing dollars. Huge name recognition, and all it takes is one of those big companies like getting really serious about it, and I think it would be very scary.
Yeah.
Well, so to answer, one other just kind of interesting philosophical standpoint that I would like to end with is just, well, so if computers take all of our jobs, then I guess we'll be faced with the end of work as we know it, and that's going to be a really interesting switch in our perspective as society adapts to that whole new economic model of maybe it wouldn't be so bad if we didn't all have to go to work every day.
How are we going to eat?
Well, I don't know. I don't know.
I'm feeling hungry. This is a worrisome thing.
But is it? I mean, if everything shifts and it's just this new regime where we have robots doing everything, then maybe a lot less people have to be involved, and there's a lot more downtime for people to pursue passions and interests. I don't know. I'm just saying, just because we've done it this way doesn't mean that that's the only way it's going to go. That's a whole different kind of podcast.
Yeah.
So,
well, I like
something to chew on.
I like the particularly like the Fine Home Building hashtag Keep Craft Alive, and not just to promote us, although I like that it promotes fine home building, but I like it because it's not about, to me, it doesn't sound like it's about pushing people into these trades because we need them, as it is about, hey, you want to go into the trades? Well, be a craftsman. Be good at it.
That's what I like too.
Be smart. Do this well, because it doesn't matter if you can find 10 plumbers, 10 electricians, 10 carpenters, if they're not good, if they're not passionate, if they don't care, and if they don't do the work well.
And that's why
you want the one that does.
And that's why when we have the one-page department in the magazine, you'll see aging, a variety of ages, from people who are just fresh into the trades to people who have been in and doing it for decades. It's that mentality of kind of bringing your A game and like
doing a good job,
taken a lot of pride in it, passing it on to the next generation if you can, getting people to care about it, basically. And, keeping it alive.
Yeah.
It's not about, signing up and mailing it in for 40 years.
Yeah.
That's the difference. But you're right. Rob did a genius job picking that title.
He did.
Maybe he'll be back next week. Haven't seen Rob in a while. Okay, that's going to wrap us up for this week. Shoot us those emails at FH. What the hell's our email address, Brian?
FHB
podcast@taunton.com. If I'm not looking right at it, I don't know what it is. FHBpodcast@taunton.com. You can also check out the show notes. Find homebuilding.com/podcast to see all those beautiful infographics that I discovered. They are fantastic.
Yes.
And big thanks to Carrie sitting in for Jeff today, doing our editing and moving the pictures on the screen behind us. And thank you to Brian and Patrick for joining me. And we'll see you all next week. Keep building and craft alive.